morning. So you are in troubleshooting ECMPS errors. My name is JessLee Sanchez. I'm a regulatory and report engineer with ESC for about over 4 years now. Alongside with me, I do have Elizondo, and he's been here about the same time. So again, this is troubleshooting ECMPS errors. Just to kind of clarify, again, we will be looking at ECMPS errors with respect to our software and hardware. So if, again, there's something that you're just kind of confused about or just want more information on, just let us know on the chat board and we'll definitely help you out as much as possible. All right, so based on last quarter for first quarter 2020, you may have received quite a bit of errors. I've seen pages for a lot of our customers from 1 pages of errors to even 15. So if you are coming across errors and you just don't want to deal with it, easy solution, go ahead and contact us for our reporting services. We will aid you with Part 75 and some state permit stuff. So feel free to reach out to us and we can, maybe see if we can help you with reporting services. And there's my sales pitch. So I will continue. It's kind of an overview of what we'll be going over today. We will be reviewing common ECMPS errors that most of our comments do experience during reporting month. Just some also simple mottos that we carry internally. We'll be sharing the importance of why process now is so important that it is passing. We'll look at EDR files and how to view them, some quick tips on to make your life a little easier when you're looking at EDR files, how to evaluate, some tips on ensuring that you're evaluating your EDRs correctly, and additional resources that can help you along the way. So these are some of the common ECMPS errors that we usually see with our customers, and the factors that cause these errors. So the one thing that makes it very complicated with ECMPS is that you can have something very direct, or you can have something that's just, you're not sure exactly where it's coming from. So there's a lot of good little practices to ensure that you avoid these common ECMPS errors. So if you're trying to import your test and it's not evaluating correctly, typically you're going to see this with there's something wrong within your QA file and your missions file. It could be that one of your QA tests was not entered correctly, whether your errata or your linearities, or you could have the second example right there, the hour AGG, which can cause, usually is due to missing time online parameters. So if you have a specific parameter within Stack Vision that is a time online parameter, if it's blank, missing, invalid, this can cause anything that's being calculated to have a miscalculation from what's being reported and what's being calculated. So again, accumulation, so miscalculated versus what's being calculated and what is being reported, sometimes you'll get a mismatch. So that's another common error that we see quite a bit. And then your data calibrations. Sometimes you have missing information that is required as far as a QA test. You need to make sure that you have the correct PGVP information, or you need to ensure that it was an aborted cal. Do you want to make sure that you use it, or are you not using it? These are the specific details that will cause up common ECMPS errors. So like I said, we have an internal motto just kind of within the reporting services is every day check your process now sequence. Now, this is really important because process now, if you do not have process now passing from quarter to date within that quarter, you're going to get hung up with a lot of process now errors. So one way to just avoid that, here are some common practices that we do internally. Making sure that, in fact, you want to make sure that your process now is passing every day. That way you can mitigate the problem right there and then, and you're not looking back 2 months prior and trying to remember exactly what could have been the cause of that particular situation. We would say at a minimum, make sure weekly that it's passing. That way, if you have to go back again, you have a small window in which you can try to remember exactly what the cause of the situation was. After reporting month is done, another best practice is just rerun your process now for the quarter to date. Sometimes we come across process now errors that will get hung up in ECMPS, and it can be simply fixed, but just by generating or rerunning process now for that quarter. That way, all the total values will calculate. Sometimes something gets hung up, and you just need to rerun process now for that quarter. And ensuring that if you've made any data modifications for emissions, you will need to rerun process now. If you've change anything to your quality assurance test as errata if you have a new updated BAF. All these specific situations, rerun your process now for the quarter. Just ensure that these changes are taking effect on your reported parameters. These are some of the specific process now sequences that you typically get hung up. Within their daily record processing, we have UDARM PDR. These are specific sequences that are applying the proper missing data flags, missing data substitution. You want to make sure that that is passing, because if you have any, again, missing, invalid, out of control flags that is associated on the missing data parameters, it would not calculate, and you will get hung up on process now. And as well as your calculated parameters, you want to ensure that they are getting calculated correctly. Sometimes its constituents will have a missing data or a missing, invalid, or out of control flag and not cascade up. So, and of course, rolling averages as well. You want to make sure that your hour rolling average, your 30-day rolling average, whatever you have configured, that these sequences are passing, and this will kind of, you know, take away a headache of trying to just even properly import your EDR. Just to reiterate some of these common process now problems: missing time online, missing load, or field fact data. If any of these parameters or these configured parameters are missing or have a blank value or field, process now will fail. If you have missing, invalid, out of control flags associated with these reported parameters, process now will fail. So just ensure that if you do get hung up on process now and you take a look at these reported parameters, ensure that you're looking at their constituents as well. Sometimes they have a missing, invalid, out of control flag, and you're going to want to make sure that you remove these and make sure that there's also a filled in field and that it is not blank. Here we have an example of a process now history report in Stack Vision. The very top is what you will generally see of the time duration of when you generate the report, as well as the time that you ran it. Now, here you actually see an example of an error. So when you select on that error, a detailed, well, in most times, a detailed message will come up to let you know where the problem or the source could be originating from. In this case, we can see that this particular parameter is missing a timeline field, or has a missing, out of control, or invalid flag on it on 10/24 at hour 8. Again, just because you see this and everything seems to be fine with that reported parameter, make sure to look at their constituents to ensure that everything is being cascaded properly. Now, this is another problem that we have seen, and you want to make sure that you avoid this: running process now and how the best practice to run process now. So ensure, first of all, that you're running the correct process now daily sequence. Sometimes you can have multiple process now daily sequences, and one of them just may have been it may have just been taken out and is not being used anymore. So just ensure that you're using the correct process now daily sequence. And if you're going to run a daily sequence for your quarter in question, make sure that you select the override ending time and date, and you're going to run only within the quarter boundary. Now, in the situation right here, this is the correct way to do it: July 1st to 9:30. But if you go ahead and enter, for example, July 1st to October 2nd, this can cause quite a mess, especially with process now errors. So just make sure that whenever you are running your daily sequences, you don't run over quarter boundaries. Just make sure that you have them within, if it's first quarter, January 1st to March 31st, and et cetera for the remaining quarters. Now, typically when you're trying to generate your XML EDR, sometimes you can have trouble generating an actual EDR file. So here's just some quick things to ensure that will allow you to produce a successful EDR. Just make sure process now is passing. Because if it's not passing, obviously, then you're just going to get hung up, and it's just going to, even if you do produce a successful EDR is going to get hung up in ECMPS. So make sure confirm process now is passing. Check any reported parameters that are in data lab. If there seems to be a hang up within any of the reported parameters, you will get hung up and sometimes not allow you to produce a successful EDR. Make sure that none of the parameters, the reported parameters in question, are blank. As I said before, if you have a field that's blank, process now will get hung up. And also, any substituted parameters are not missing, invalid, or out of control. At the very top, this is a perfect example of what you will see when you're not able to successfully generate an EDR. And in this case, we have the fuel flow is missing. It either has a missing field or one of the flags is being marked missing, invalid, or out of control. So just ensure that these are just kind of quick references to look at before you even generate an EDR. And this is why we also emphasize that it's important to look at your process now and that it's passing weekly, daily. Just don't let it go the entire quarter until you check process now. Okay, so here we have an example of an XML EDR on the left-hand side. So when you open your XML and you're wanting to look at any specific data, it's going to be listed as such. It is a little more tedious to look at it in this version right here. So what we recommend to our customers, if you're able to have other tools such as XMLPad. XMLPad is right here located on the right-hand side, and this will give you a more clear and concise view of any particular data point that you're trying to look at. If you go to, for example, like I said, this is XMLPad, you can open up in table view and you can look at specific dates, times, hour, as well as the any emission rate or calculated value that you're trying to look at specifically, and it's just a lot easier. So we highly recommend that whenever you're trying to solve any calculated emissions issues, if you want to look at just QA tests, really helpful to have the tools such as XMLPad. So I highly recommend that. But again, you do have the option on the left-hand side, and it will look as such. It's just going to be a lot more cramped up. So in the event that you have an import failure where you've successfully produced a XML EDR out of StackVision and you try to import it into ECMPS, sometimes this will not, you will get a fatal error such as this one that's occurred right here. So some things to keep in mind, just make sure you have the correct version number, make sure that ECMPS is up to date. You want to ensure that there are any that all your data points are valid and that nothing is keeping it from importing successfully. Do you have any IT restrictions? Sometimes we come across customers where the type of file itself is not going to be successfully imported onto the customer's client machine because of IT restrictions. So just make sure with your IT that you are able to import the files appropriately as such. And what do you do if sometimes in the instance we get a loading constantly? So you're trying to import a XML EDR and it just keeps generating over and over and over. So what do we do? Just like IT suggests, have you restarted your machine? In this case, have you restarted your ECMPS client tool? So just go ahead and close out your ECMPS client tool, reopen it, and try re-importing your XML EDR and see if you're still getting the same import error. If you are, you may want to contact ECMPS, but in the event that this is occurring, just give that, and sometimes, just go ahead and close it out, open it back up, and sometimes this will fix your situation. Unique test numbers can also cause an issue. So make sure that whenever you're entering your linearities, your ratas, that you have the appropriate information. And again, this is a very common ECMPS error. Sometimes there's a missing component ID. Sometimes they have there's a wrong test number. Sometimes it's not even selected to report an EDR. StackVision will automatically report an EDR, but sometimes you can accidentally unclick it and it won't report. So those are some common, really quick fixes that are associated with any quality assurance tests. Just kind of keep an eye out for those when you're entering your information. Again, also gas certifications. Make sure that you have the appropriate gas certificates with the appropriate information. The type of bottle, the gas combination, expiration date, the tester, the name of the tester. These are all the things that ECMPS will catch when you try to import and evaluate. So just, again, go back and just make sure that all the information that you're entering is correct. As I expressed before, cylinder bottle issues, a very common ECMPS error, just because of missing information. Like I said before, cylinder ID, your vendor ID, expiration date, gas combination, all these little pieces of information will give you, such as we mentioned before, DayCal/30/A, just an example of a DayCal error. So look back and just ensure that you're entering the correct information, and you should be able to avoid most of these ECMPS errors. Again, very, very common. Now, internally, when we look at when we're doing our EDRs and reporting them for our customers, we have a lot of valuable resources that we're constantly referring to. Of course, the EPA has really good references for how to submit your monitoring plan, any QA and certification questions, and also in reference to your emissions. You can again look at Part 75 and Part 63. These manuals are obviously your reference for your specific units, and just make sure that when you ever are making changes or you have any questions, please refer to these references because they will tell you what QA tests need to be done. Do changes to your monitoring plan need to be made? These are the kind of the questions that will come up, and again, the policy manual, the plain English guide, all these are really good references just for simple, quick questions. Or if you have a really complex question, which we come across, again, feel free to email the EPA, as well as flow diagrams. And I will be showing here an example of exactly. Here we have, if you're trying to determine, this is coming out of the policy manual, if you're trying to determine a QA status, again, we've probably seen a lot of flow diagrams before. Are you a year-round reporter? Are you using a redundant backup? And if you're not, is your relative accuracy less than 7.5? And it'll give you guidance to tell you when your next QA test is set to be due. But again, there's so many references, the plain English guide, this policy manual, a lot of really good references. And if you have any other questions on something specific, feel free to just shoot us an email, or and we can try to help you as the best possible. So just some things to keep in mind. Again, making sure when you're looking at reported parameters and you're coming across these CMS issues, and it just make sure all the other factors are are lined up. Your decimal points, are you reporting the correct decimal point, the correct formula? Are you, and then what, just the main things, is it being configured correctly? As far as your EDR templates, make sure that, again, they're configured correctly in Stack Studio. Has it been updated and downloaded to Stack Vision? Just like some of the common things as far as if you're having trouble figuring out an ECMPS error. And again, working in with conjunction of all these other reporting resources can also give you guidance to what you're looking for. So here we have some examples of some errors in ECMPS. Again, if you look at the top, you can see a critical derived hourly value error in which it's complained about, gives you the specific time. You can easily pull that up in Data Lab. And Data Lab is going to allow you to, again, bring up that specific time frame with the specific flags, and just ensure that you're bringing up your missing and invalid and out of control flags. And hopefully with this should give you guidance of where the calculation could be incorrect. We also see, again, year-to-date inconsistencies with the calculated values. And then we also see a missing PEI component ID. That's a really quick fix too. So that's just if you go into Stack Vision, looking up that specific PEI test, and just applying the appropriate component ID with the test number, or just making, or if also making sure that the test was done in the correct time frame too. So again, all this should give you some guidance to where you're trying to solve this ECMPS error, but these are very, very common though. Another quick fix, have you upgraded recently? So some of the versions of Stack Vision that we offer may actually fix any informational critical errors that are being produced in the future quarters. So again, we follow ECMPS notes, and we're constantly giving Stack Vision upgrade, or we're constantly doing Stack Vision upgrades to fix any minor bugs that could be potential in the future. In this case, we know that we were having missing data sub informationals that could potentially become critical in the future. As of now, I don't think they are yet critical, but again, even a simple upgrade of Stack Vision can take away, not only prevent those criticals, but also take away these informationals. So just be sure to know where you're at with the version of Stack Vision, and if you need to upgrade, um, reach out to Stack Vision support, and or we can send you information as far as any bugs that may be related to the new upgrade. Now, oftentimes with how complex Stack Vision is, you'll see very similar parameters, and that can get very confusing. So sometimes you'll see a NOx and maybe a NOx ppm. So to ensure which parameters are being reported based on your monitoring plan that you have configured, a very quick fix or quick way to establish or just to see which reporters are being parameted, go ahead and open up Stack Studio. And if you go ahead and if you filter to the side and open up the EDR template, you'll be able to select your hourly operating values and your drive hourly values, along with just your summary values, and it'll be able to tell you what your time online parameter is, what your if your mat's affected, what your SC factor is, what your again, just your drive dollar value. So all these, it's just really important. This is really good guidance just to tell you exactly what parameters are being reported. And again, you could actually use this part to see where your system component IDs are and update them as well in Stack Studio. So again, really good for reference. Or you could again, another option is also opening up your monitoring plan in Stack Vision, but most of us actually do like to refer to the Stack Studio to see what the most up-to-date monitoring plan is. One of the other common ECMPS errors that we sometimes see, and this is where most of our customers have to be really careful, and you can reference this from the policy manual, is what tests need to be performed, and with respect to the situation that they just, so in this case, we see a replacement of an analyzer. Now, in this case, we have two situations, because you can replace your analyzer, or you can have a replace as like kind analyzer, right? So you got to be really careful in which situation is going to be applicable to you and your facility. That way, you run the appropriate tests. Again, you can reference this to the policy manual. So what else does it take to change? Um, so some of the things that you could get caught up with is just make sure, are you changing anything to your monitoring plan? Are you making any changes? Make sure that you're updating to Stack Studio and that you're downloading to Stack Vision. That way, when you generate the most up-to-date QA emission files, you have the most up-to-date monitoring plan as well. If you're entering a new RADA, you're going to want to make sure, again, that you rerun your process now, your daily process now. You have the correct information as far as vendor ID, et cetera, that we mentioned before. If you're entering new linearity tests, 7-day, all these are tests that that you may have to perform if you're doing some type of situation such as this back one of changing out an analyzer. So just be careful whenever you're making a change that you refer to your policy manual and you're performing the correct tests. ECMPS will catch this, and make it really, really difficult to resubmit after you've submitted this. So now sometimes when you just because you generate an EDR and you produce no errors for the current quarter doesn't mean you can't produce future errors in the next reporting quarter. So one of the things that you're going to want to just ensure that you're on top of is, was all your quality assurance tests performed in the time span that was appropriate? So kind of test stepping back, was the last quarter even a QA quarter? Because then you may not have to worry about it, but you want to make sure that any QA tests that need to be performed may not show up as an error in the current quarter, but can produce in future quarters. Missing linearities, missing ratas. If you changed out a analyzer umbilical cord, did you perform the correct test? A 7-day cal cycle time? Did you do a PI if you changed out a flow meter? These are the kind of things that you want to prepare for, so that way you don't get hung up in ECMPS in the future or the next reporting quarter. Here's another example of the year-to-date quarters of miscalculated versus the calculated versus the reported. Again, taking a look at that reported parameter, bring up all its constituents, and ensure that there's no missing, invalid, out of control flag, or that all the fields are filled in appropriately. These are the typical problems that we see when we have a mismatch. So that can be easily fixed if you just take a look at that really quick. Now it can become more complex, and in that situation, if you're having a hard time figuring it out, feel free to contact either EPA or ESC, depending on the situation. Now, when you're looking at these reported values, here's actually a quick way to report or to look or to view your calculated and your reported parameters values. If you go to if you bring up the cumulative emissions report, you can see here that we have our calculated parameters and some time online parameters. The one thing to keep in mind about a cumulative emissions report is the value is only reflective upon the last time process now history passed. Now, if you have process now failing a week ago, well, then that last value will be representative of when process now passed, which was a week ago. So make sure if you're looking at this report, if you're going to be comparing year to total dates in the XML file versus Stack Vision, that process now is passing up to the current previous day at the top of the hour. Now, if you don't want to take a look at your data within your ECMPS client tool, there is an option. Again, for the most part, I think it's pretty laid out, but if you want to export any data, you can export this in an Excel spreadsheet. That way, maybe it's a little easier to compare and contrast, or if you have any other permit reports that you need to work with, you can go ahead and export your emissions files, QA insert data files, or even a monitoring plan. In this case, there's an export data tab for the emissions data in this portion. Things to keep in mind when you are looking at your reported versus your recalculated emissions is make sure, again, is your equation correct? Is the correct equation being applied to the reported parameter? Do you have a BAF? Is there a bias adjustment factor that needs to be acknowledged? Is it the correct one? Sometimes the BAF doesn't even need to be applied in certain situations. Maybe in the example, if you have a redundant backup and it's using a different BAF. Is your time on, are you checking all your time online? So these are the kind of things that you want to look at that become more of a complex problem, but can give you ECMPS errors. Now, when evaluating your EDR, make sure that these are the options that you are selecting. If you've made any changes to your monitoring plan, you're going to want to select a monitoring plan. Any QA tests that have been done typically what we do is we just select for that specific reporting period. You don't need to do much with that. It's just going to go back and review all your QA stuff. Now your QA cert events, typically what we do with that one is we go year back. If you have any test extensions or exemptions, go ahead and select that as needed, and your emissions. Now, another internal motto, or not a motto, but just a form of practice, we always do select force reevaluation for all selected items. You can see that in the very bottom. So this, in case any modifications were made to date, you're going to want to head and select that. That way it reevaluates everything that it just did. So it's not leaving out the new changes or the modifications that were made to any data, such as your emissions or anything like that. Again, troubleshooting steps, is your process now passing? Okay, really, really important. Can you generate a successful EDR also with process now passing? Okay, and if you're able to generate a successful EDR, are they reporting without errors? Are you getting fatal errors when trying to import to ECMPS? Okay, so just those are the kind of just a quick quick check to ensure that you're not going to be wasting too much time by doing these low simple or these troubleshooting steps. And again, if you need edited data, if you have any edited data, start right from the top, rerun process now, generate a new clean EDR, and that way you avoid any potential hangups, right? So again, I mentioned if you have any problems, please feel free to contact. They're very, very responsive, great support. I provided the email ECMPS-support at camdsupport.com. When you do email ECMPS, please, just to kind of make it easier on them, please include your facility ID or your ORSIS code, your, what the area that is that you are receiving. If you can generate a PDF, go ahead and do so of that error and go ahead and attach it along the email and the XML file that you are evaluating, the actual file. That way they can produce the same situation that you're experiencing. Resubmission. Do you need to, so whenever you're resubmitting, typically this is based on any change that has been done to your emissions data. Okay. Did you change your monitoring plan in a way that affects other quarters? Okay. Or was there a change to a QA test that maybe there was an incorrect BAF or anything that will affect the emissions data, you will need to resubmit. Okay, and if you're ever going to do so, you can go ahead and here's the link there at the bottom. I've provided that for you, and again, you'll just provide your information, and they are really, really quick to respond. So if you ever do need assistance with that, feel free to contact ECMPS. They're really, like I said, really great and helpful. Right. So if you're running out of time, so rarely does this occur, and this always just wants to be avoided. But if you come down to the wire and you're on the 30th day and you're not going to be able to figure out what is causing your critical error, you can submit with a critical level 2, a non-critical and informational error message. We've had this before. But you cannot submit with a critical level 1. Now, if you do submit with a critical level 2, you have 30 days to figure out, another 30 days past the deadline to fix any errors that need to be acknowledged. So it is possible to submit with critical errors. You just want to ensure which critical error you are generating. And if you do so happen and you can submit that critical error, you're going to want to select include files with critical errors, as seen on the right-hand side. Here's some additional resources. Reporting documentation, again, you can please feel free to look at the EPA. If the EPA is always coming out with release notes as well, that's the next one. And I encourage you to peruse through them and just to keep updated exactly what changes are being made, especially with everything going on now. We're going to want to keep up to date with any changes that are occurring. If you feel free to reach out to us, and we have a lot of available resources. And I believe we're going to be posting this presentation up. So if you want to refer back to this, you can. There's our website, and also the EPA website is there along there with it for you. Again, I'm JessLee Sanchez. If you have, I'll go ahead and leave the room up to questions. Again, my associate Edward Elizondo, thanks for being online, and thanks for Anna for posting this and helping me with this. Again, I'll open up the board to questions.
Hey, Jess, we actually had one question while the presentation was going on, while you were presenting.
Sure.
And just so that we can reiterate for everybody here, and I'll read you the question and we can go about answering that. It said, if you have a process now error, is there a way to specifically know what fixed it? And then the second part of that is, will the alarm always clear once it's acknowledged? That was one that I tried to answer. I understand that the text, there was, I guess, a good bit that I put in there. The text is kind of small on that. I was saying that with that, in short, that really no, because it depends on the person who fixed the error typically. And I know for us, whenever we look at how to fix the error, we're going into the process now history report and actually
Mhm.
seeing what task that the it typically failed on, and kind of
Mhm.
going from there, and viewing it that way. So if it was our support team that maybe was the ones that fixed it, then they can give you an explanation of what exactly did fix it. If you're fixing it yourself and going about that, then it would be a situation where you know what you did that fixed it. But if it's something like a time online needed to be fixed, or something to that effect, then you it, it's kind of simple. And I hope that that answers the question. I don't know if you had more to add to that, Jess, or
Ye-
not.
Yeah. So, and I can look into that too. But typically, when we're trying to solve a problem, and you can run a debug on certain situations to where it'll throw back a text file, and it'll kind of just tell you, okay, this is where you're getting hung up in the process now error, depending on the situation, right? Um, but to have a specific answer, like a feedback report, to tell you, okay, this is where process now was bombing out, and now it's fixed because of this change you made. I don't know of anything like that. But another maybe tool that could be utilized is logbook. And in the situation where something does occur, there are annotations made. So that's a possibility, and that's the only thing I can think of to um, maybe keep track of how a particular situation was mitigated. Hopefully that helps.
Right, because in our system, even when things are modified, um, the, you might get something that says that it was modified, but it doesn't give you exact
Right.
details as to what it changed from that it was before. So,
The only thing I could see is maybe um, taking a look at you could probably figure out when that modification was made, maybe, and then see who logged in. That's the only thing I can think of, or maybe. But yeah, you could piece things together, but I would say probably the most simple way to do is just keep everything in logbook and annotate everything as much as possible. But I don't know of any other way to to have a feedback report to tell you the what 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 the problem or what the fix was for that particular process error. I don't know that.
What about acknowledging the alarm? Will it clear the process until
So
it returns again?
you can acknowledge an alarm. You don't have to fix a process now error. You can acknowledge, right, Edward, right? Because you can acknowledge the alarm and then go back and try. Now, if it's still if the process now error is still there by the time the next process now sequence kicks off, the alarm will pop back up. Is that correct, Edward?
Yes, that's my understanding too. And that's
Yeah.
why in the answer, I was saying that you would want to ideally go ahead and fix that error first and then acknowledge the alarm, because
Right.
otherwise I believe that it's going to, you might acknowledge it, but it's going to come in however often that process now runs. And especially if it's hourly, that would probably get kind of annoying to have to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that alarm every single hour. So I probably best to go ahead and see if you can get it fixed before actually acknowledging it and kind of going from there.
Yeah.
So, one sec, looks like we might have another question. Or I guess it was specifically to me. It says, I do log everything, but with typical alarms, it's easy to determine what specifically fixed it.
If maybe
It-
if
I
we
was
can.
curious if I could pinpoint the specific parameter. So as far as that goes, whenever it comes to the specific parameter, that's another one that typically in the process now history report that it will show sometimes with that what exactly that it is getting hung up on, even whenever it comes to the parameter. The the only thing with that is it once process now gets hung up to the point to where it does fail, is it at that point it stops its processing, right? And so what ends up happening is maybe that is involved in something else, but it now it doesn't give a complete picture, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But whenever process now does fail sometimes, that it stops at just that point whenever of where it was too critical for it to move on. And so that's another thing sometimes, if you can tell, to go in and see with whenever it gives you the parameter name, maybe you had a communication issue and you are missing some type of time online stuff. Do you want to look past possibly just that date that it's telling you that it failed on, and see if maybe there's the other hours that might be directly past that, so that you're not having to go back and just fix it, run process now again, and then it fails, and having to do that over and over and over.
Yeah. Exactly what Edward said, and especially also knowing where your process now is failing. That's also, again, like that's when I was going over that slide. It's kind of important to here, I can show you real quick. So it depends on which sequence. I mean, these aren't all the process now sequences. It's all dependent on your system, but in like looking at where exactly your process now is failing, that can actually indicate where you need to go and kind of figure out what the problem could potentially be. So if you have, if you're failing on UDR and PDR, more than likely it's a timeline parameter, right? If you have map pack or H rolling day roll, then you're talking about a calculated parameter that you're more than likely going to need to take a look at its constituents: missing data sub, missing invalid, out of control flags, things like that. So taking a look at where your process now is failing, and then like Edward said, process now will give you specific, for the most part, give you specifics. Now, if you're already looking at all this and you've established that I don't have any flags, all the timeline parameters are there. I mean, sometimes it gets a little more in depth, so it's very dependent. But yeah, that's just definitely the best way to start. I would say I agree with that word.
So on that last slide, that other slide, Jess, if you go back to where we showed an example of an error, just so that they can see real quick. Keep going for the,
For the process now error.
yeah, process
Right.
now error. It actually says there, like it gives the unit, then it says unit op hour and the date and the hour. So typically you'll see something like that as well.
Right.
But we have a couple other questions going on here too. Do you know if Spectrum Prism has something similar to Process Now in Stack Vision?
If Spectrum does,
Yes. I, I don't know the answer to that question
yeah,
offhand.
and I don't know the answer. That may be more of a detailed question. If you would like to provide your email, and we can definitely find you the answer of exactly what specifically, because we just joined with Spectrums not too long ago, but it's still in the merging process, and to my understanding, they're dealing with the quality assurance testing. But as far as their specifics to their software, I don't know much about. I know it's very similar. I just don't know much about it.
And then the other one that we have is what if users send information about the error uh, corresponding resolution to ESC? Then ESC could compile these in the customer portal so we all could see them. I agree with that. We do have some solutions, some common solutions that are out there already that should be available to everyone, and the they they do the best job that they can, right? Sometimes there are unique situations for different systems because we're dealing with so many different places that have specific needs. All of you have different needs uh, that you need for your regulatory compliance. And so because of that, sometimes that creates some unique situations and things will have to dig a little bit deeper. There are solutions that are available out there though, for the most part, for some of the more common things that we do see. And if those things don't help out, then definitely our support team or even for us sometimes for reporting, we will figure those things out and try to post those solutions so that there is more and more information available so that we can get these things resolved for y'all.
Yeah, well put, Edward. Yeah, if you go to enviruses.com, you can go ahead and pull up your resources, especially if you're one of our clients. And there are additional resources that when you log in successfully, that you can, like Edward said, reach out and look at different knowledge articles that we that we review on a week basis and ensure that it's up to date. Because like Edward said, everyone has a unique situation. What type of unit are you? What type of version of Stack Vision are you at? All these factors come into play, and so it makes it really difficult to put everything all into one. But essentially, that's what we are doing. So if you go to the website enviruses.com and and you're a customer and you can successfully log in, they could take a look at the knowledge articles that we've written up that may pertain to a certain ECMPS error. And again, like Edward said, if you cannot figure it out, feel free to reach out to our support services, and we will try to help you out as best possible. And again, like I said, the EPAs they're pretty um, helpful as far as guidance. So yeah, don't be scared to reach out.
Any of these questions that you have now that you feel like we didn't answer completely, then my email is available. You can definitely contact me. Uh, just kind of cooped up in my house at the moment, as probably a bunch of you are. So I will do some digging and figure out the answers to those questions if you feel like those were not satisfactory.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, reach out to us and we could, well, yeah, like Edward said, we'll try to, you know, follow up with anything that we, didn't completely answer. So,
I think that's it as far as questions, Jess,
okay.
from what Anna was telling me. So I think we might be good.
Okay. Well, thank everyone for joining in. And again, feel free to send us any questions and stay safe out there.